both Anna, both of you actually covered a lot of what I was going to say, but let me put that in context for you, and I'll answer the question in two parts. Our major competition is the Chinese government. They have taken over the rare earth space and created two companies, and they're completely vertically integrated, and they've done a very, very good job at it. There's no doubt about that. They're very good at what they do. So that's the first part of the answer. The second part of the answer is to say that we see vertical integration as absolutely necessary. But when you consider our position, we sit at steps 4 and 5 in the rare earth permanent magnet manufacturing supply chain. Upstream of us, we have the miners, we have the people who separate and process into oxides. We do the metals and alloys, and then downstream of us, the magnet makers. And none of us are vertically integrated yet. And so the traditional model where one can sell from the other through the supply chain does not work. It is not competitive. We cannot compete with the Chinese using the traditional business model. And so the challenge for us is to bring into the supply chain, or bring that vertically integrated supply chain in. Now, how you do that, one of the suggestions we have made over time is that we cooperate, we collaborate, and with whoever's in that supply chain, and then we all take a share of the profit at the highest value add point in the chain. Now, whether that's a magnet, or whether we're even looking at going further downstream now into the motor manufacturing, the traction motor manufacturing. And that's a challenge. It's a challenge to get industries who've traditionally competed and stood on their own to change their way of thinking. But they're going to have to do it. We are going to have to do it if we're going to be competitive and if we are to survive.
Thank you. Yeah, excellent points. I'm going to make one comment about circularity, just from the perspective of an industry that's already established it. I think when you're talking about vertical integration, I think, and true circularity means ownership of your critical material is often retained. And quite often, I mean, that is true circularity, right? Ownership is retained. But that means the recycler is quite often providing recycling as a service. And it's providing that service to other regions, other countries. And trade and taxation policy is not geared towards that. It's not geared towards material moving across borders where it's not necessarily been imported or exported by the owner. So I think we need to rethink some of our trade and taxation policy in the light of true circularity of critical materials. We don't have much time left. I'm going to ask for a short answer. The key challenge as you see it, is it high energy costs? Is it planning and permitting? Is it lack of infrastructure? Is it trade policy? What is the number one challenge as you see it? And I'm going to start with you, actually, Grant, on the other side.
Can I say all of the above?
All right, yeah, fair enough.
For us, I highlighted in my previous answer, it's the collaboration. We need to change the way we think so that we can compete effectively. And the corollary of that is that the OEMs, the customers, if they want fully ESG compliant European manufacturing, they are going to have to pay a premium. There's no other way around.
I mean, I would second that. From an SMMT perspective, thinking about the UK automotive sector, I think the political stability that is needed long term to allow these long term, and we kind of touched on timelines and the challenges around that, providing industry with long term stability so that from an investment perspective, they understand what the market's going to look like in 5, 10, 15 years. We haven't had a chance to touch on rules of origin from an automotive perspective, which is kind of, at the 11th hour at the moment on that one. And there's every reason that could be revisited, and that relationship between the UK and the EU could be revisited in the future. So for me, I think it would be that political long-term stability in this space.
Yeah, I can't disagree with anything that has been said. It's all completely relevant. I think it's just that joined up thinking. It's joined up thinking from policy, how we finance things, how we manage to get different parts of the value chain together. It's just let's all join up.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of commonalities in that. I mean, we may be looking at different materials and totally different products, but I think we've got commonalities in those challenges. I think we're at time. We'll take one question from the audience, if there is one. One over there.
Thank you very much for setting out those essential or must-haves or minimum viable conditions to take it forward and be competitive vis-a-vis the Chinese into the OEM. So what you've just laid out, do you believe that is clearly understood by the UK government? That's part one of the question. Part two of the question is, if it is understood by them, is there a dedicated unit within the UK government, a catalyst unit, an enabling unit that is working and collaborating with the private sector to mobilise those key requirements you've just spelt out? And if there isn't, what do we need to do and when into the UK government to get it fixed and to get it moving? Thank you.
I'll have a go at it. The short answer is no, I don't think it's understood, but we're getting there. It's been a brick wall, and I've probably got a flat forehead from banging my head against it for a number of years now. But I do believe that the funding that was made available last week may be the turning point for the UK government. I don't think that there's one point yet in the UK government that we can all go to. There's disparate groups, there's different fundings, there's the APC, there's the ATF, there's all sorts of letters. And frankly, I sit in my office and think, who the hell is that one? I don't know who that one is. That's a new one. I've got to look it up. And I don't think there ever will be, because I think that's the way of the government. So I really think it's up to industry, and we are moving, we are working to overcome those issues and collaborate. There's no doubt about it. In fact, I think that industry is a long, long way in front of most of the governments, apart from potentially the US government at this stage. The Europeans are playing catch up. In my home country, Australia, I don't think they get it yet. And here, it's too disparate. But industry, particularly here in the UK, we are working to collaborate and overcome those problems. So I've been on a number of talks with ministers, and I find that we're always 6 to 12 months in front of them. And I think that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah, I'd echo that from an SMT perspective. I think, you know, the advanced manufacturing plan and the battery strategy were good indicators. I think that there's a solid level of understanding of what is needed at a broad level, at least. The challenge is pulling the different departments together to make sure that they're all pulling in the same direction in terms of delivery. And that's the challenge that I think we've got over the next 12 to 18 months. And depending on what happens with the next government post-election, there could be a shift there as well. So I think, yeah, there isn't a kind of a one size or one-stop shop at the moment in terms of delivery in this space. From an automotive perspective, we are lucky in that we have organizations like the APC with some funding that they can access, and we do push them in that kind of general direction. But more is needed to catch up with the states that we're competing with.
Just that I think one of the key things that the government really needs to understand is the level of funding if it's going to fund projects. I don't think it's been very well understood until recently, or maybe it still isn't understood, that to be competitive against China, against the US, and even some European projects, we just don't get the level of funding that's needed. And that's across the entire renewables space. It's just not enough to get projects off the ground.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I'd like to echo that. I think government is listening, but government is not a single entity, and it's that coordination across all the different bodies of relevance, and there are many, that I think is still a bit of a challenge. But you know, I think absolutely. I will say, I think a lot of regulatory oxygen has been sucked up by the battery metals, and we need to widen the conversation because there's so much more to talk about. So that, you know, that bandwidth needs to be widened beyond the battery metals now. I think we'll leave it there. Kirsty, yeah, you're happy? Thank you very much to the panel.